You had that locker room talk, if you will, with the tap past the 2 minutes. Trilogy.
Yeah, so I was looking at the timer, and all I remember is my teeth getting squeezed through my lip. And I clearly looked at the timer, and it hit 2 minutes. And I was just like, okay, well, maybe there's a lag between like what is on the screen and what the actual person is doing, calling time. I think what happened was people were like cheering, and I think the referee, Victor, maybe didn't hear the person yell time. So when it hit 2 minutes, I was like, okay, like maybe it's lagging. So I only count to 5. So I counted like 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 5, and then the match still hadn't stopped. And I just feel my lip getting pushed, my tooth getting pushed through my lip. So I pointed at the timer, and then I tapped like the match has been over for 10 seconds. And then I knew the match was over, and I just wanted to ride it out a little bit longer just to make sure that there was no confusion with the time. Yeah, I knew it was going to be difficult to hold on to him and to finish him, in overtime. And I knew that I was up on ride time going into the third round, and I knew that he had to get a submission, so I knew he was going to be gunning hard to get to a submission. But I've done many EBI rounds with him, and I kind of knew what to expect.
Did you expect it to go into the overtime? Were you ready for like just the?
So I was kind of curious to see what kind of game he was going to play, and in the first minute or two, I figured out that he was just going to play a really stally game. Like an ADCC was kind of coming at me because he knows that the negatives will, it's a points rule set. It's a lot more tactical. Whereas here he knows that if he stalls, that he just goes to overtime, and then that's like his best chance. Yesterday I asked in the rules meeting, like, what are the repercussions for greasing? And they said, you can't grease. I'm like, well, okay, what happens if someone gets caught greasing? They're like, nothing. I'm like, oh, so you can grease. So the second that the sweat started hitting his wrist, and I've trained with him many times, and he's often very slippery, and I was trying to get a hold of him, and the second he started sweating, and he was definitely lotioned, and the lotion came out, I was like, yeah, but between the stalling and the fact that he was lotioned, there was just no way I was going to be able to hold on to him. Like even in 50-50, I had an Achilles grip, and he was almost slipping his leg out. And then in the overtime, that makes it so much harder to hold on to the hands defensively because the hands are so slippery. So the wrists the hands come out, and then they punch across your face, and you're like, oh shit, this is no good. So when the second he started sweating, like 2 minutes in, and then the fact that he was just hips back, head low, kind of not trying to pass or do anything, I knew that it was going to be a longer match, and it was going to be tough to get anything going with his explosivity and the amount of slipperiness that we had.
And earlier you mentioned like lotion or greasing, whether it's intentional or unintentional. For a lot of guys out there, is that something that happens often in the sport? Is there a problem in the sport that that doesn't get known enough, or is it just on occasion it'll pop up?
Yeah, it's a big problem in jiu-jitsu because, especially with me, because people don't really gauge themselves on how good they are anymore by whether or not you can beat me. They just gauge themselves on how long they can last, or can they not get submitted. So their whole goal is just not to get submitted. And one of the best ways to do that is with grease, because the less friction you have, the more pushing grips you have to use. And my whole thing is to pull guys onto me to actually go into submissions. Like when I'm in bottom position, you want to elevate the guy to pull on, to come on top of you and get underneath the center of gravity and go into submissions. So the more friction you have, the more pulling grips you can use. But when you lose friction, you have to push more. And the pushing grips are kind of counterintuitive from bottom position because I'm trying to get a hold of the guy. So the grease makes a huge, huge difference. Like we did a grease test one time when we were in Puerto Rico, and it's like a 20-fold difference from like bare skin with grease to like a long sleeve rash guard versus grease. So it makes a big, big difference, and it is a big problem. That's why in the future Fight Pass invitationals, we have to have some kind of a repercussion for greasing, like whether you dock pay or whether you get extra overtime, riding time, or just making the athletes wear long sleeve rash guards and spats, I think would completely eliminate it almost. But something has to be done because, like I said, I asked at the rules meeting, like, oh, what if they grease? And they're just like, well, you can't. And I'm like, well, if there's no repercussions, then you can. That's like saying you can't take steroids, but there's no testing. Like, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I guess that was kind of answered my question. I was going to say, how do we combat this sort of thing? You think that's the best wing? Either make them have to wear the long sleeve rash guards? You think that might be something, the easiest fix to it? Or
yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, you can dock pay, which would save the UFC and organizations a lot of money if they were docking pay. But for a lot of athletes, just winning, especially against me, was worth a lot more than any amount of pay, because they'll build their brand, and the brand, just a win off me will make a lot more money than whatever purse they're getting for the match. So they're not really concerned about the pay. But a long sleeve rash guard and spats will definitely solve it, because then the grease won't come through the long sleeve rash guard and spats. Like it's just material. So that'll definitely. Eddie Bravo wanted to do this at one point. If not spats, at least long sleeve rash guard, so you can make some kind of upper body grips to pull a guy onto you.
Congrats on the victory tonight.
Thank you.
Rapaz, isso deu uma repercussão. Uma galera ficou falando, foi bomba contra creme no corpo. E então o Gordon fez um story falando sobre isso que eu vou traduzir aqui pra vocês. Se alguém notou, havia uma razão pela qual eu usava uma hash guard de manga longa nas minhas finais do ADCC e uma hash guard de manga curta no resto. Na luta passada, eu não tive essa opção dessa vez. E também, para de reclamar sobre bomba versus creme no corpo. Pads são legais em nosso esporte, e por isso que todos, mesmo aqueles mais abertamente contra eles, como vimos recentemente, os usam. O creme na pele, por outro lado, sempre foi ilegal. Se você não tem certeza sobre os efeitos do creme no corpo, eu encorajo a experimentá-lo na academia para ver como é impossível fazer um bom jiu-jitsu. Ensaboe-se com creme e tente com um amigo que costuma te agarrar com força quando você está usando. Você vai entender. E essa foi a reclamação do Gordon. Agora me conta aqui a sua opinião sobre isso tudo.